Of all the changes that have occurred this patch, especially rituals, I think Fafnir is probably the easiest now. Now, just like in the past, Fafnir is pretty much just a speed check for your teams. Now, I'll go over some of the mechanics of Fafnir, as well as the changes that have happened, and also go over the team, which I feel so confident about. So, Fafnir is one of the few bosses that actually has multiple health bars, and each time you destroy a health bar, the Esper responsible for doing the last bit of damage will be frozen in place. Now, while that Esper is frozen, Fafnir will have a number of shield stacks on him, and the only way to remove those stacks is by hitting him that number of times. So, one of the big changes that happened this patch with Fafnir's shield stacks is that he actually has a lot more of them now. And he gains more of these stacks from having this sort of buff on him called the Andvari shard. But like all buffs in the game, you can actually remove these and actually steal them as well. So when we begin to look at Espers, we want to look at ones that are fast, can move around the gauge, can remove buffs, and also protect us against the towers of Fafnir, which can apply disease and other effects to us. We also want to make sure that the Espers we choose are wind attuned, because that'll make it a little bit easier. The ones that stand out to me that have the multi-hits would be like Yu Yi, Meredith, Vermilion Bird, even Hathor or Akana could be useful as well. So there's actually a few choices. Now, one of the more interesting picks was actually Hall, which can apply damage at the end of everyone's attacks, meaning is most likely to be the one frozen, and this was suggested to me by my clubmaster. Now, in testing, I actually had more problems with Fafnir's towers than Fafnir himself, because his ability to play disease and stun and a bunch of other effects was actually kind of making my team very inconsistent. To fix this problem, I actually used the old fusion Esper, Gabrielle. I'm not sure if she'll become available as a fusion for newer players at a later point, so I really hope that you're able to get her before this. So this is the team, and just by looking at it, you can see there are a lot of improvements that can be made. Meredith could be level 60, and there could be a lot more resonance on each of these espers. One of the most interesting ones is actually Resonance 4 on Lu Yi, or the Archer guy, which will allow him to start removing buffs on Fafnir. And just a reminder, you could have gotten Meredith from a previous event, and now you can get Lu Yi from the shops. So let's see what each Esper looks like. Meredith is probably the most important Esper on this entire team. I mean, she has a speed lead. She speed boosts her entire team, heals them. She also has multiple hits on her first skill, which can remove buffs. If we could stack multiple of her, we probably would. Now, Lu Yi is amazing. All of his attacks are multi-hits. He does true damage, and when you have him on Resonance 4, he can remove the Andvari's treasure off of Fafnir. Next up is Gabrielle, who not only scales damage with speed, has multi-hits on every attack. She offers immunity to your whole team while attack breaking the boss and defense breaking the boss, which makes her pretty much invaluable. I can only hope that you're able to fuse her when you're able to. Next up is Vermilion Bird, who also scales with speed. All of her attacks are multi-hits, and she's able to steal the Andvari's treasure off the boss. Lastly, we have Hall, which has been surprisingly good. Not only does he add an additional hit to every other Esper's attack, but he also last hits, which means he's the most likely to be frozen by Fafnir. Now, this makes the team very consistent, because if he's frozen, that leaves the other Espers open to use their abilities. Now, typically I would focus on turn order, but for Fafnir, you actually just want everyone to attack as often as possible, which just means you stack as much speed as you possibly can while maintaining their other effects. Now let's see the team in action to kind of get a fair assessment of how it performs. Now the clear on the first wave is actually pretty decent, and Hall wraps things up nicely. There's really not much to say about the waves leading up to Fafnir, aside from the fact that Hall does make the clear faster. Now, as I mentioned before, unlike most of the other bosses, turn order doesn't really matter because you want to cycle through your turns as often as you possibly can. And here's a perfect example of why a Hall is so useful in the run and adds so much consistency. As you can see, Fafnir actually has the max amount of stacks on his shield. Now with his team being as fast as it is, you can actually get enough hits in where that doesn't matter. And now the shield's broken, Hall's free to do his attacks. As you can see this time, Vermilion Bird is the one who actually got frozen up. But again, that really doesn't matter because the team is so fast that it can just remove the shield like it's nothing. So this is the third unit that's been frozen by Fafnir, but even with all that variation, you're still able to clear the shield quite well. There's a good example of the attack break on Fafnir, causing him not to do much damage at all. And as we hoped, Hall is frozen again, which really works for the whole team setup. But I have to say, the damage that Vermilion Bird can do is a bit impressive. Now, I've tested this build quite a bit, and it's remarkably consistent, and I think that Fafnir is probably the easiest of the rituals to farm now. Now, the time is always a bit long on Fafnir, so this is really not too different than it was before, unless you're using a cheese build. Well, thank you for watching. Make sure to comment if you have questions, and subscribe if you liked.